everybody. This is the Nitty Gritty. My name is Chad. With me, as usual, is Leonard. This is a show about wrestling. And before we get to this week's topic, Leonard had sent me a video link where he got his question featured on Jim Cornette's podcast, which was fun, right, Leonard? It was actually a good question, by the way.
Thank you. For those of you who haven't listened, you can find it on YouTube. It's searchable under Jim Cornette about why referees slap the hands of heels off the ropes.
Right.
I was watching a match. Sometimes I watch random old school WWE, and it was a match between Paul Orndorff and Brian Blair. And Blair goes for a sunset flip, and Orndorff grabs the ropes and gets his hand slapped away. And I was thinking, I've seen that happen to Flair a lot. And why would that be? Because any other time you grab the ropes, it breaks a move or hold, and they're not using the ropes for leverage because they're not doing the hold. So I wrote that in, and I think Jim gave a very good answer to it, even though my name turned into Mr. Hoo-Hoo from Hee Haw, Ohio.
Yeah.
And, people butcher my name all the time, although I will probably say that is the worst I've gotten. And yeah. I do give props to Brian Lask for pronouncing it correct to start with.
Right, yeah.
A lot of H's in there, I think, is what got him. A lot of H's.
Yeah, it was the way that he delivered your name in the town. It was somewhat of a tongue twister, I guess. But anyway, it was cool to hear your question. So this week, we are going to be revisiting our Rebooked series. And this time, we are going to be tackling WCW World Championship Wrestling Uncensored 1996. And before we get to our rebooks, let's go over the event itself. It took place on March 24th, 1996 at the Tupelo Coliseum in Tupelo, Mississippi. And there were 7 matches on the pay-per-view. And there were 4 featured on the main event show, the WCW main event show right before that. So I'll go over the main event card here first. You had Mr. JL against Dean Malenko, Jim Duggan against Big Bubba Rogers, Dick Slater with Colonel Robert Parker against Alex Wright, the Steiner Brothers against the Nasty Boys. On the main card, you would have Conan against Eddie Guerrero for the WCW United States Heavyweight Championship, the Belfast Bruiser against Lord Steven Regal, Colonel Parker against Medusa, the Booty Man with the Booty Babe against Diamond Dallas Page, the Giant with Jimmy Hart against the Loch Ness, Sting and Booker T against the Road Warriors in a Chicago street fight, and the main feature of the card, the infamous feature, was the Doomsday Cage match, which pitted Hulk Hogan and Randy Savage against the Alliance to end Hulkamania, featuring Ric Flair, Arn Anderson, Meng, the Barbarian, Lex Luger, the Taskmaster, Z Gangsta, in the Ultimate Solution, and around ringside were Woman, Miss Elizabeth, and Jimmy Hart. So I'll just say, I revisited this pay-per-view before this rebook, and it sometimes when we've done these rebooks, the cards are pretty much are in my head enough that I don't need to revisit it. But in this case, I wanted to revisit some of the lower card because I do remember the main event match, but some of the other matches I did not. And, this card is maligned as being terrible because of its main event. And I don't know that that's fair. Because there's a lot of decent work on the undercard. At least I thought. It's not like great stuff, but it's decent stuff. And, but it's just the main event is just not good at all, and we'll get to why, I'm sure, as we talk about our own cards. But, Leonard, what are your memories of this pay-per-view?
Well, I remember watching it live at the time, and 2 very distinct impressions kind of stuck with me. One was the Booty Man coming out during the main event and handing Hogan and Savage frying pans to use as foreign objects in the Doomsday Cage. I don't know if I've ever seen frying pans used as a foreign object before or after. Maybe in those Good Housekeeping matches that Jarrett and China had.
Right.
There were frying pans. I don't remember specifically. And then the other main impression was Booker T in the Chicago street fight, kind of a coming out for him. I know Jim Ross has that saying that sometimes you got to put that dog in there to see if it hunts. And
Right.
even though I didn't know that term at the time, that was really the kind of the impression I got. I came away from that going, oh, they see something in Booker T. They wanted to break him away to Stevie Ray to see what he would do. They wanted to put him in there with guys like Sting and Road Warriors to see what he would do. And of course, his star just elevated from here. So that may be a positive. And when you talk about the card in general, the Chicago street fight is fine. The ending's a little bit silly where Lex Luger helps and Stevie Ray helps out in the back to chain Animal. The best match on the card is probably Regal versus Fit Finlay, who was the Belfast Bruiser. Even though that's hurt by ending in a DQ finish. And then the opener, Conan versus Eddie Guerrero, is very good as well. The ending there was a little bit wonky. It involved Eddie kind of hitting his head and knocking at himself out a bit for Conan.
Well, and you mentioned the endings, and that's a running theme in WCW. And I think that's one of the reasons why they might not have the reputation that they deserve at certain eras, because – and Eric Bischoff has admitted this freely on his podcast, 83 Weeks, and he's talked about it ad nauseum, the fact that they never had a guy that could give them good endings. And you see it time and time again. And, we'll get into, our card, and I'm going to talk more about that specifically.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, this event, was in, like I said, in 1996. So I was 14 at this time. So, and, after the Hulkamania thing ended in WWF, this was during a period where I was watching wrestling casually, but not serious. I wasn't nearly as invested as I once was. And if I was watching, it was probably to see what was going on with that guy named Steve Austin. But I knew about this match, and I knew about Hogan's work in WCW, but I don't know. In my head, as a kid, being a kid growing up as a Hulkamaniac, I looked at the Doomsday Cage and I was like, oh, that's really neat. And, I told Leonard off air last week that one of my first looks into some of the reviews at 411 Mania, the site that we wrote for, before I wrote for it, was you had Scott Keith doing recaps and reviews. And he gave this match -5 stars, I believe. And at the time I was like, why would you criticize Hogan that badly? But in retrospect, and you watch this match, you understand the match is just bad in general for many reasons. But anyway, let's
well, it should be, before we go on, it should be mentioned that Kevin Sullivan in a shoot talks about this. The original idea was going to be Hogan and Savage against Sullivan and the Giant. And Hogan was kept going, oh, we got to put more people and do this and do that. And Sullivan kind of let him do whatever he wanted with the idea, because Sullivan's deal was he had just started working with Hogan, and he felt if he gave Hogan this, then Hogan could trust him, and then he could bring other ideas to Hogan in the future and get him to play ball in different ways.
That's not how Hogan works, brother.
Nope, doesn't work for me, brother.
But yeah, we'll get to that. I have some interesting ideas, and I'm anxious to hear what Leonard's ideas are.
Sure.
So let's get into our rebooks here, and I'll just say that my card was booked in a way where I didn't adhere much to the storylines going on. Mm-hmm. I looked into them, and I used what I could and what I liked, but I didn't adhere to them fully. I booked this card as if I'd be booking it today, which I am obviously, but I put the matches on there that I think I would have wanted to have seen looking back. So bearing that in mind, Leonard, did you put any matches for the main event card, the pre-card?
No, I booked 9 matches total. Nothing for main event. I just didn't think about it. I probably could have slapped a few things together, but I just didn't worry about that.
All right. So
it should be mentioned before we go forward that we gave ourselves a wrinkle that we had to keep the Doomsday Cage match, and we had to keep the Chicago Street Fight, the two gimmicks used on it, but we could put anyone we wanted in there, use those any way we wanted. And we should also remind people that we not only can use people who appeared on the show regularly, and that includes the main event, but anybody who's working regularly for WCW at the time, anyone under contract. And I believe we have both in the past used rosters from the SmackDown Hotel to kind of fill in those gaps. So I did look at those, and I do have, I think, a few people who were working for WCW but not on this card,
right,
taking part in this.
Right, and I'm glad you mentioned that. And I should go over also what the Doomsday Cage match is for those who might not fully remember. They might remember what it looks like, but so basically, I talked about who all was in the match, and the cage match involved Hogan and Savage having to start at the top of the three-tiered structure, and on each level there were members of the alliance waiting for them. The structure featured scaffolding with steps on it to enable the wrestlers to traverse it, with the object being to make it to the bottom of the cage where the ring was and score a fall to win. So that is what it looked like. I will put some pictures up here. If memory serves, there's not a ton of clear pictures of the full cage, but I will do my best to put pictures here on the episode. So I had 4 matches for the main event, and I believe the exact number of matches they had for their regular card. So we'll do it this way. I'll talk about my first 2 matches, and then we'll just get into Leonard's card, and that'll kind of even us up there.
Good, yeah,
a little bit. So the first 2 matches on my main event card, I pretty much kept a lot of the people that were on this, with a couple exceptions. I just switched some people around. Mm-hmm. So my first main event match on their pre-pay-per-view card would be Big Bubba Rogers versus the Belfast Bruiser. So basically you have 2 big brawling guys, and I did like the work that the Belfast Bruiser, who would become Fit Finlay, did with Lord Steven Regal on the main card, but I think it would have been cool to see somebody like the Belfast Bruiser go against Big Boss Man, Big Bubba Rogers, Ray Traylor. I think that I would have given each of these matches maybe a hair more time, but if you're going to do like a double DQ or a DQ finish or a count out finish, you would have it done here with 2 guys that are brawling on the outside or something like that. But I still think the work they would have done would have been halfway decent. So.
Yeah, I could see that. I toyed with using the Belfast Bruiser against One Man Gang, who I think would a similar type of match, maybe even a bit of a rougher one, because OMG just comes across a bit rougher than Big Bubba Rogers. I think that's an interesting, unique, and different matchup. And again, I could see that being where those guys are at. You know, Bubba's not necessarily going to drop to the Bruiser. You don't want to drop out the Bruiser. So, yeah, I think having that be like a brawl on the outside, double count out, I think that's fine, especially if it's your opener to main event.
Right. Well, my next match I have is Mr. JL, who should be reminded that this is Jerry Lynn in a mask. Mm-hmm. And I put him against Alex Wright. So here you have 2 technically sound guys, 2 guys who can move a little bit faster in the ring than the first match that I had up there. And, Alex Wright, for the weirdness of his gimmick, did some pretty good work in the ring. Jerry Lynn is still in the business working as an agent. And, he's kind of an unsung hero as far as his in-ring work goes. But I think that these 2 guys could have put on a decent short match.
Oh, very much so. I think because of the pacing and the technical prowess of both these guys, even if you gave them 5 minutes, they would give you a really good 5-minute TV match. I think that's true.
Right. Well, Leonard, what's your first match?
So interestingly enough, and I should say before we get into this, I tried to book some things, much like you. I didn't focus on storylines. I tried to book stuff that I would want to see, and maybe we hadn't seen before. The idea of uncensored in one degree could be, these are things that you don't see, that are not common, that are crazy or different or spontaneous. It's uncensored. So my opener, it's a fatal 4-way for number 1 contendership to the WCW World Television title. And I do a lot of contenders matches on here to give some matches a boost. It's Billy Kidman versus Mr. JL versus Alex Wright versus Jushin Thunder Liger.
I like it.
So Luger was a television champion at this time, but the belt wasn't defended on the card because Luger was in the Doomsday Cage, and of course we'll get there to see if I used him in the same way. So I've got something similar, but again, usually WCW during this time period kind of did cruiserweight spectaculars to open the show. And this would be very much that. This is at the era where four-ways and triple threats were becoming more common, particularly in ECW. I don't know if WCW had up to this point a fatal four-way, at least on pay-per-view. So I think that's new, that's different. That's something you can say, oh, it's uncensored. And these guys, I think would all work very well together. Like I said, with Mr. JL and Alex Wright, you're throwing two other guys in there that work a similar style, up-paced tempo, a lot of technical prowess, high flying for the time period. Since whoever wins here is going to get fed to Luger later on, I would probably give it to Alex Wright. I think he's, the guy that would probably do best as right. Someone could be fed to Luger. But I definitely think this would be a very good match to kind of wake up the crowd for the start.
Absolutely. I love the idea of that match and it being for a number one contender spot. I think it would be a great match to start the card. So yeah, that's definitely a match I would have wanted to see. We're still in my main event pre-card category here. So my next one, I have Dick Slater against Jim Duggan. And this is obviously Jim Duggan post WWF days. Yeah. But, his Mid-South days, like he could really get in there and brawl with the best of them. And I think it would be fun for a selling point to see Jim Duggan getting in there, slugging away with Dick Slater. It wouldn't be pretty. It wouldn't be technically proficient, but you'd have Jim Duggan, a person that people know, against another guy who, looks like he can go, and just have him go in there for a few minutes. And, I might have Jim Duggan go over, but I think it would be cool to see those two go against each other for this type of spot to maybe sell some more pay-per-views.
Yeah, definitely. If you go into this knowing this is just going to be a slobber knocker, as JR likes to say, against just kind of two gruff guys and two guys a bit past their primes, we can say that, but could still go in this type of match. And I think that I don't know if they ever had a lot of matches together, but I could see Duggan and Slater having good chemistry with each other.
Absolutely.
So my next bout is Sherry Martel versus Medusa Maselli with Colonel Parker suspended above the ring in a shark cage, because I love shark cages.
I thought about using one of them on my card too. I ultimately didn't, but
okay. Well, I actually only had 7 matches, and I wanted to add a couple more, and I didn't even think about doing main event. But looking around, I thought, maybe I could do a women's match. And Medusa and Sherry actually were in a love triangle with Colonel Parker at this time. And that's how you got the match on the main card of Medusa versus Parker, because Sherry and Medusa had fought on television prior to that.
So yeah, what I would January of this year, I believe.
Yes, yeah. So what I would do is do a repeat of that match, but you got to add something to it. So with Parker being in the middle of these two ladies, I do the thing with the shark cage. Medusa and Sherry work together a lot. Even going back to the mid 80s in the AWA when they both started out. So they know how to work together. I think this would be a good match if you let it be a good match. I would have Parker still trying to interfere and drop something to Sherry from the cage, brass knuckles, what have you. Medusa would intercept it and use it on Sherry to get the win. So that's Medusa getting her triumph over Parker in a way in a match that makes more sense than probably Medusa versus Parker.
No, absolutely. And you know what? It's funny. I had thought about doing this as a match as well. And then I'd seen that they had a match in January, and I was like, well, I don't know if I want to do that. And if I did, how would I change it? I like the way you change it with the shark cage. I actually think that makes a lot of sense. And it's kind of sad that these two never really got to have that prominent matchup in this era because, you know, in this time frame, women's wrestling was very much an afterthought, and wasn't really paid a lot of attention to. And it's kind of a shame. I mean, Medusa was really athletic, and man, she looked really good in this era, I think. But that's a match that I would have enjoyed seeing, and I think people should have seen more of Sherry's work in ring. But
I think Sherry and Medusa, if you transplanted them to today, they could work and get over.
Yeah, absolutely. And on that in that same vein, the main event for the pre-card matches, I would have now. WCW Women's title wouldn't be created until later in this year. Mm-hmm. And so at this point, there is none. So we are at a pay-per-view where recently Medusa took the WWF Women's title and threw it in the trash. That just happened. So I would kind of fast forward a little bit and have the WCW Women's title created here. And I would have Medusa going against Miss Elizabeth. No, here's my strategy. Now you think about all the times when, and especially in women's wrestling, where you would have like one of them in a match and nobody would think that they would stand a chance. Everybody think, oh man, this is going to be destruction. They're just going to get killed. Think about like Stephanie McMahon or somebody like that who won the women's title way back when. This would be a similar situation here, and it would paint a picture of kind of how my pay-per-view is going to go. And I would have Miss Elizabeth go over here. It would be like interference from whoever you wanted it to be. Woman, Ric Flair, you know, this was Miss Elizabeth as a heel at this point. She had turned her back on Randy Savage. So she's very much, a baddie in that way. But I would have it be shenanigans involved, but I would definitely have her be the WCW Women's Champion. And I realized Miss Elizabeth had no real in-ring experience. I understand that. But the fact that the First Lady of Wrestling did not get a title of any kind, even if it was in some weird way, like I'm describing, is kind of a crime. So I would have the fact that this part of my card ends with a title going around the waist of Miss Elizabeth. If that doesn't entice people to buy and see what else happens, I don't know what would. So that's my idea. I can see, Leonard, you're toying with this in your head.
Yes. This definitely fits the whole, you're going to see crazy shit because it's uncensored. Certainly. Right. Miss Elizabeth, to my knowledge, wrestled twice, both against Daphne, right. Your favorite lady. One, I believe, was a one-on-one. The other was a tag match. I know Elizabeth was with Luger. I believe Daphne. Yeah. I don't remember who Daphne was with. It was either David Flair or Crowbar. And I had to look that up because a few years ago I was commissioner of a fantasy league. It was an all women's wrestling thing. And I had to double check to see who was eligible. Our eligibility was they had to work a match. So thanks to Vince Russo, Elizabeth, all the Nitro girls, a bunch of random people are eligible as having had matches. I find it hard to picture Miss Elizabeth holding up the belt over her head, but it's certainly an image that I think would intrigue a lot of people. I would guess that she probably would not hold it long, but it's a neat idea. And again, that's not a good match. I assume that that's probably very short.
It would be very short
due to the interference from whoever. And certainly it might, like, if that's the case, like I'm thinking the next logical step is Medusa versus Woman. And then I don't know how much Woman has worked. And then beating her to get back to Elizabeth and I don't know what all, but that's certainly one I never would have thought of.
There you go. Well, so what's your next match?
So next up, like I said, I did a lot of number one contenders matches because I just thought that was something extra to throw in, and it's a reason why I can kind of get maybe some heel versus heel and face versus face matches going on. So I have a number one contenders match for the WCW World Heavyweight title, and it's One Man Gang versus the Giant. Now, a match was held on Uncensored between the Giant and Loch Ness, where the winner got Hogan, I believe, the next night on Nitro or at some point. So I like One Man Gang better as an opponent for the Giant. These are two of the biggest and baddest guys on the WCW roster at the time, and they never faced, from what I could find. Both were heels at the time, but who cares? I would make this pretty short because the bloom is going to be off the rose here very quickly. I think you're going to get a great visual of the two of them in the ring. I would let the Giant hit some of his usual stuff, One Man Gang to hit some of his usual stuff, and it probably makes the most sense for the Giant to win and to get that title shot, since that's kind of what happened in real life anyway.
I think that this would have been a better match than the one we got, which was the Giant versus Loch Ness.
Loch Ness is totally immobile. At least, even at this point, Gang could move a little bit.
Absolutely, and a One Man Gang, can actually work in the ring and would probably be a good person to control the match for a very green Paul White at this point. So I think it would have been fine for what it was. Certainly better than the one we got on the card. So the first match on my actual card is a match that I kept the same from the original card. Surprise. Okay. And that is Conan versus Eddie Guerrero.
All right.
WCW United States Championship. Now, let me say this. Initially, I had Conan going against somebody else. I'll get to that. But if I had my way, I would have taken the belt off Conan somehow before this card even got started. Because this is the era. This is not the bout it, Viva La Raza Conan. This is the Conan that dressed in like flashy superhero gear. I don't know how to describe it. It was weird ring gear for him. But that's the era of Conan we have. And, so I was really struggling on what to do to assemble the best card. But when I watched this, I was like, wow, Conan and Eddie Guerrero actually had really decent chemistry. Mm-hmm. And it makes sense that they had decent chemistry. So I kept this match the same. Here's what I would change. The ending, which is a weird, as you just said, wonky thing where Conan, maybe inadvertently gives Eddie Guerrero a low blow, maybe doesn't, maybe, whatever. So I would have Eddie Guerrero go over here. Eddie Guerrero at this point could go really well in the ring. I think it would have been a cool surprise to see him go over here. And so I definitely would have had the clean victory for Eddie Guerrero here. But that's how I would have changed it. And I think it would have been a better match as a result.
Yeah, I always felt it very weird when I ever looked at lists and see that Conan had the U.S. title. I was like, really? Because I had no memory of that.
Right.
So it was a very unauspicious run for him. Putting it on Eddie, great. So if you're going to keep the match, making that change makes the most sense. So my next bout, and we're getting into some oddball territory here. It's an 8-man tag. It's the Four Horsemen of Ric Flair, Arn Anderson, Dean Malenko, and Chris Benoit versus Hacksaw Jim Duggan, the Booty Man, Marcus Alexander Bagwell, and Dusty Rhodes. So Dusty is on commentary here with Tony Schiavone and Bobby Heenan. I just like the idea of using the Horsemen as a unit and seeing how I had them, I kind of had them left, and who did I have left to put them against? And Duggan and Booty Man and Bagwell were kind of the hodgepodge. And you could set this up by on Saturday night having, Flair versus Bagwell and Booty Man versus Anderson and Duggan versus or whoever. Have the Horsemen work with these guys over a period of some weeks to kind of build something between them. Then I would have this originally booked as a 4-on-3 handicap match. Flair goes to the commentary table beforehand, starts cutting a promo. Rhodes gets on him. He gets in Rhodes' face, and Dusty stands up and he puts himself in the match to what I assume would be a big pop. So this is something that people would certainly talk about the next day. Dusty coming out of retirement to be in this match and all the history him and Flair, him and the Horsemen had. So while it might feel a bit sour to have Dusty lose coming out of retirement, or at least semi-retirement for this match, I don't think you want the Horsemen to lose. So I would probably have, let's say, Flair pin Bagwell, doesn't matter, and then Dusty kind of clean the ring post-match and stand tall.
An 8-man tag, it seems like a cool idea. I had thought about doing like a big tag match like that. I went in a different direction, but I like that idea. And I especially like the idea of getting Dusty to get involved at the last minute. I think that would be a cool thing to get the crowd to pop for sure. And yeah, you definitely want to have the Horsemen go over in that case. So my next match further paints the picture of the story I'm trying to tell for my pay-per-view. And I have the Giant versus the Booty Man. So this is going to be a squash, and a squash to the point where kind of people are shocked at how much of a squash it is. You have the Giant just destroy the Booty Man, and kind of chastising him, asking him, why are you, because remember, the Giant is, had feuded with Hogan as well. So asking the Booty Man basically, why are you following this guy? Why do you still help this guy, being Hogan, of course, and, taking out his frustrations on the Booty Man, and basically asking him why he's continuing to follow Hulkamania when Hulkamania is dying, blah, 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 blah. So keep that in mind as we go along, but that's my match. After we have Conan and Nitty Gritty with a cool, technical match, and here we have a squash. You have Hogan's right-hand man getting squashed, and you could even have Hogan come out kind of being in awe, looking at what happened to his friend. So,
and one thing you have here is you could bring up that the Booty Man was the Zodiac in the Dungeon of Doom,
right?
Or the Alliance in Hulkamania, or whatever faction that was, because that was acknowledged, because they have said that he had joined as a ringer, as a double agent, whatever.
Right.
Yes, so you could really bring that up and use that here in the storyline. I would also have the Giant kidnap Kimberly Page, or the Booty Babe.
I like that idea too.
Pick her up, throw her over her shoulder, so you get a nice buckshot on Kimberly. Absolutely. As he walks out down the aisle with her. What becomes of that, who knows? But I just like the idea of not only does he destroy Booty Man, but takes his woman. That's insult to injury.
If it were Attitude Era WWF, you would see a scene in the hotel room with the Giant and Kimberly Page.
Yes, later on. So my next bout is where the Chicago Street Fight comes in. And I changed the name, but it's the same thing. It's a UK street fight of the Belfast Bruiser versus Lord Steven Regal. So I'm keeping that match the same. I'm giving it the stipulation because these guys had a really brutal bout on the card regularly, and the street fight component, I think, would just allow them to go that one step further and to have a finish. I think this could be a real classic because these guys have a very similar matches to what they did have, and use the stipulation while not going too far over the top, but kind of let that flavor more of what they're doing. And while Regal, I would say, was probably the bigger name and getting the push, I would give the win to Finlay, because a win here to Finlay, because he was newer, the Belfast Bruiser wasn't really known, I think would really elevate him. So I would have Finlay win this. And I think Regal could always come back and say, well, it was a street fight. I mean, of course, I'm going to lose to a barbarian in a match like this. He could never beat me in a classic catch-can thing. So Regal can save some face in that way.
I like that idea a lot, actually. It's funny that we both kept a match. And I like this being the street fight. And I think that the match that we saw on the card was decent way up until the end, where they just didn't know what to do and they just had outside interference, which is just such a lazy, half-assed way of booking, in my opinion. Like the fact that you can't come up with anything more creative than that. I mean, but anyway, I think that your idea is much better, and it would have been cool to see how that played out on the pay-per-view. Okay, so my next match is Dean Malenko versus Arn Anderson. So this is just a match that I wanted to see. And I looked back and, I saw interactions with them because they were both in the Four Horsemen at one point. But as far as I could tell, these guys never had a match. And if they did, it certainly wasn't anything on a notable pay-per-view. I think that the two styles here suit each other really, really well. This is a young Dean Malenko and an older Arn Anderson. So I just think it would have been really cool to see these guys work in the ring while they were still healthy enough to do so at the same time. And I really think that this would have been a classic. I love Dean Malenko's work. I think he deserves more notoriety than he has. Same could be said on a lesser level same with Arn Anderson. And I just think that if you ever wanted a definition of styles that mesh well, I think that would be the case here. So this is simply just a match that I, as a fan, now at my age, would have wanted to see back then. So
I think this would be a great mat-based encounter with a lot of grappling. You're right; these styles do mesh. I don't know what kind of storyline you could put. It could just be, again, the idea, hey, it's uncensored. We can do whatever we want. So here's a match that you never thought you'd see. Or maybe something where Anderson and Malenko were kind of both vying for that enforcer role with the Horsemen. You know
what? You could even make this a number one contenders match for the TV title.
Sure, you could do that too. That was kind of what I was doing a lot on my card to kind of get some people put together. But this would definitely be a great match, especially if you gave it some time. I think this could be an easy 20-minute match and not feel long and be really, really fantastic. I think this would be a great match.
All right.
So, again, same thinking a little bit as your match. So I have a number one contenders match for the U.S. title, and it is Randy Savage versus Eddie Guerrero. So, Ric Flair and Randy. So here's what I found. I looked to see if this ever happened. At Slamboree the same year, they were doing like a Battle Bowl type of thing, and Ric Flair and Randy Savage were a tag team against Eddie Guerrero and Arn Anderson.
Right.
So, but as a single, I don't think this ever happened. While the dream match would be Savage from about 10 years before this against Eddie around this time period, Savage could still go at this point, especially with the right opponent like the series he had with DDP. I think Eddie is certainly a guy that could bring out, the old Randy Savage, the 87 Randy Savage, the Savage who had the feud with Steamboat, that type of guy. So since both were faces here, that's why I went with the number one contender stipulation. Eddie was in the U.S. title picture at the time because he had a U.S. title match on the Real Show against Conan. And since Hogan was the world champion and Savage was his buddy, he can't go after that. So let's put him in the U.S. title picture as well. This just has potential to be awesome, an easy 4 stars at least. And kind of what I said before about, the Belfast Bruiser could really use that push by getting the win, getting that elevation. I would give Eddie the win here, and I think Savage would put Eddie over. I think if you go back and you look, Savage really never had a problem putting someone over if it was good for them or good for the company. I'm sure that Savage had some, respect for the Guerrero family and would be cool with that. So I think Eddie beating Savage here and then them doing a handshake after would do wonders for Eddie's career. He's on the rise anyway. This is strapping a rocket to him.
Well, yeah, this is certainly a dream match, and I wish I would have thought of it. I mean, I think that this would be a really fantastic bout between these two, no matter what eras of their careers, really. It would have been something I would have loved to have seen, and I think that they would have meshed pretty well together. I think that Guerrero could have gotten more of the high-flying stuff out of Savage and maybe made an older Savage look better. And likewise, I think Savage could have gotten a more patient pace out of Eddie Guerrero and maybe less of the lucha libre stuff at this point. So, yeah, I think this could have been really cool to see. And, even the promos, especially if we're talking about a later era Eddie Guerrero, it would have been great to see. So, yeah, I love that. So speaking of Randy Savage, I have a street fight for the World Television Championship, and it is Randy Savage versus Lex Luger.
Okay.
And I had thought about having like Elizabeth in a cage, but we're not quite at the open romance between Luger and Elizabeth yet. They might have been that way behind the scenes at this stage but maybe not, I don't know the timeline. I know that Savage and Elizabeth were certainly divorced by this point, and Elizabeth was married to somebody else. So,
yeah, at least on camera, Luger and Liz weren't an item until very late, like 99, 2000.
Right. So it might not have happened here yet, but the storyline going into this is, Randy Savage and Hogan are buddies, and Randy Savage is preparing for this match and is maybe a little irritated at the fact that Hogan is spending so much time worrying about the condition of like the Booty Man, for example. Mm-hmm. And, he's worried about his friend, the Booty Man, and, Savage is worried about his match with Luger because it's a street fight and he might need some help, yada, yada. So Savage goes out to face Luger, and it's a really close match between these two guys. I think that Savage could have made Luger look a lot better than Luger was. And I think that these two guys would have worked fine together overall. And some of the kind of no rules, no holds barred matches that Savage would have with DDP were really good. So I think that this could be a good way to showcase these two guys. So I would have this be a close match, but I would have other people interfere with Luger, such as Elizabeth or Ric Flair or whoever else. Because remember, this was supposed to be an alliance at this point between a bunch of people. So I would have all the interference that Luger wanted to have to maybe keep the television championship, but I would have Savage go over just barely at the end. So basically the story I'm trying to tell is that Savage wins this match, but he's very hurt. And, he's very beaten up by the end of this match, even though he kind of eked out a victory. So
it's interesting that you had one new title win and 2 title changes so far on your card. Luger could work with the right person. Savage, I think, would be the right person. This gimmick would be the right kind of gimmick to hide a lot of what Luger's got going on. The idea here, you mentioned the fact that Luger was part of the alliance. It was very shady about who Luger was with, what he was doing.
Yeah, and I hated that part of it. Like the fact that he, and we'll get to this later, but the fact that he and Sting were tag team champions, one guy's a face, one guy's a heel, but they're friends, but also Luger holds the television championship. It's all so very strange. And the fact that on the original card, we hadn't talked about this yet, that only one title was defended on the original card was
the US belt.
Was a huge mistake. And so I didn't like the way all that was done. I think that there was a missed opportunity and a lot of confusion on the part of fans as to who was with who and what was actually going on. So anyway.
Well, it should be mentioned that the originally booked here was a TV title match of Johnny B. Bad versus Diamond Dallas Page.
Right.
And that Kimberly was aligned with Bad, but he left to go to WWE.
Right.
And so basically his last day, he jobbed the title to Luger because that's who he's face. And that's how Luger got the belt. And then that's how the Kimberly got moved to the Booty Babe and that thing started. So that was part of that. So my next match, it's basically a default pairing. It was what I had left. So for the WCW US title, it's Conan, who's the champion, versus Road Warrior Animal.
Oh, wow.
So we'll explain how this got here a little bit later. But again, this is a match that, never happened. Conan, as we talked about earlier, I think was very on his game during this period. Animal is an interesting opponent for him based on size and strength. Yes, it's a styles clash. So I'm not sure what kind of match we would get out of these two. I freely admit it may not be a great match. I don't think you want to put the belt on Animal. And I think Animal's losing to Conan. So I would go with a DQ finish here. They go to the outside. Animal grabs a chair, what have you. But Animal would lose by disqualification. And, at least this is a match no one would ever think to do.
No, definitely not. And I agree with you. It might not be the best match to look at. But so as a result, I think the only way you could do it is end with a DQ finish somehow. The idea of Animal having the U.S. title is just something that I have trouble picturing in my head. Like the fact that Animal with a singles title in any way is just weird to me. Mm-hmm. But yeah, that sounds like your piss break match, Leonard.
Yes. The only time I think Animal worked briefly as a single in late in his WWE run. I think he was just known as the Road Warrior.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it would certainly be interesting to see that unfold. So my next match is Ric Flair versus Lord Steven Regal. It is a submission match, and if Regal wins, he gets a title shot. So this is not for the world title.
Okay.
But if Regal wins, he gets the title shot. Now, obviously, we have a heel versus heel match here.
Okay. Well, what happens if Flair wins? Does he get a title shot?
No, if Flair wins, then he just wins.
Okay.
Then then Regal goes away.
Basically.
Okay. I mean, I guess you could make it hair versus title shot, but who knows? So basically, I think that this is, again, selfishly, this is just a match that I would have wanted to see. Sure. And these two didn't have a match. If they did, it was late in WWE period, and I don't think that even happened. So, because these guys were both bad guys often, and you just wouldn't have seen this pairing. But I really do think that they could put on a great match. Mm-hmm. And that was kind of what I was looking for here. And if it was a submission match, oh my gosh, like the work on the mat that these two guys could do would just be phenomenal, in my opinion. And, I might even have Regal go over here somehow so that he gets a title shot and then loses to Flair, like on a Nitro or something. Mm-hmm. So.
Yeah, I agree with you. This would be a really great match, a match which I don't know if we ever did happen because they were on the same side of the ball, being heels a lot of the time, but never really aligned, I don't think. Yeah, these guys could work, especially a submission match. Each of them would pick a body part. Flair would definitely pick the leg and, just work it. And the way they would work it, I think, and the way they would do their different segments and heat spots, and even if they went outside the ring, would just be so, so crisp. On one hand, and this is me playing devil's advocate, I could see this being two guys who are too similar, and you wind up with a bland match because of that. But I don't think that's very likely. I think both these guys probably have their working boots on. We want to put on a good match together with each other. I think it certainly has all the potential on paper to be excellent.
Yeah, the crowd might not be as into it as I would like them to be.
I can see a dead crowd for this, yes.
But screw the crowd. That's what I say.
Right.
All right.
That's a very mixed Vince McMahon way to book. Screw the crowd.
Yeah.
So next up, this is my next to last match, so my 8th match, I guess. For the WCW World Heavyweight title, champion Hulk Hogan versus Road Warrior Hawk.
Ooh.
So dig this. I looked this up. In Japan in 1993, Hulk Hogan and the Great Muta in a tag team faced Hawk and Kensuke Sasaki, if I'm saying that name correctly. It's on Facebook. I found it on a Facebook page.
I have a side note. I have a High Spots box set of all Hogan's work in Japan.
Yes.
I'm pretty sure that this match is on there. So
okay. So for me, seeing this and seeing these two guys in the ring together is absolutely mind-blowing. I think it's just a hell of a visual of these two just nose to nose. In the match, Hawk does a military press slam on Hogan, which was amazing to see. So is this match going to be good? Probably not. I think it would be an amazing car crash. I think Hogan would sell for Hawk and make him look good until the inevitable comeback. And you don't put the belt on Hulk. I mean, you thought Animal as a U.S. champion would look weird. Well, if Hawk was the WCW World Heavyweight Champion, how weird is that?
That would be very weird. Very weird.
And since I did a DQ in the previous match, I don't want to do that again. So I think I would have Hogan win clean, but then have Animal run out, and they kind of do a double beat down, and then you can have Booty Man, Duggan, whoever Hogan's friends come out and help make the save. And then that could probably lead to a tag match down the line, say Duggan Booty Man versus the Road Warriors type of thing.
Even cooler would be if you're playing on the Japan matchup, it would be cool to see Hogan do some of his Japan work here, because that's not something that he ever did. He never even flirted with the idea of working differently in America. But if anybody who watches his Japan stuff, you will see that he does work differently over there, because he had to work a different style there. So I think if you incorporated some of that here, it would be even more interesting for Hogan in this era. But yeah, you kind of have to have Hogan go over clean. How does Hogan become the champion?
I thought Hogan was the champion at this point.
It was Flair.
Flair was the belt. I see when I reviewed
Flair
it,
and Savage had like a long program, basically.
Mhm.
And Flair had won twice against Savage, at least twice. One was a straight up match, I think, and the other one was a cage match. And I think the cage match was on the previous pay-per-view. So
okay, that is my bad, because I thought when I had reviewed Uncensored that they had said that the winner of Giant and Loch Ness would get a title shot against Hogan, and maybe I misheard that. But hey, anyway, this is whatever I want to do. So let's say Hogan beat Flair on Saturday night. Who cares?
That's all right, because I have something similar happening. So
Okay.
we'll get to mine right now.
Right.
Like I said, I didn't want to take the title off Conan earlier because I had done something like that elsewhere. I didn't want to do it twice in one card. So a Doomsday Cage match for the WCW Tag Team titles. And we have the Steiner Brothers versus the Road Warriors versus the Nasty Boys versus Harlem Heat. And if you're picturing 3 tiers, you have the 4 teams on the top 2 tiers, and the goal is the same. It could be the same. It could be, have a fall for the win, or it could be the first team that escapes the cage wins the match. Whichever way looks better as a visual. But I definitely think this group of guys would have worked this style of cage better. There was a lot of history and a lot of work with all these teams. Like you had the Nasty Boys and Harlem Heat working together a bunch. You had the Steiners, maybe not always, like they didn't really have a lot of work with the Road Warriors, but you certainly had Harlem Heat, kind of trading stuff with the Road Warriors. And I would have had probably the Road Warriors take the titles off of Sting and Luger somehow in a previous match on TV. That's what I would have done. That would be my kind of cheat, so to speak, would be to take the titles off of the heel face team that is just full of weirdness and put them on an actual team. So that's what I would do here. I would put them on the Road Warriors perhaps, and I would just have these 4 teams, go crazy in this cage. And, if I didn't have the Road Warriors retain, I might lean towards like Harlem Heat or the Steiners here, but it's kind of up in the air as to who I would have to win. But I think that to me, this was the best way to use this idea. So,
well, you know what? I did something very, very similar to you, but more of a clusterfuck.
Okay.
So, but again, but first to talk about what you did here. Yeah, great pick of teams, great use of the cage idea. I definitely think you need to get the belts off of Sting and Luger, and I'll just go into my match. It's very similar to yours. So Doomsday Cage Gauntlet match.
Ooh.
For the WCW Tag Team titles. So Sting and Lex Luger are the champs. They start off in the top cage with the Blue Bloods of Squire Dave Taylor and Robert the Earl of Eaton. Must win by pinfall or submission in that top cage. Winner, and of course I'm going to have Sting and Luger win, they come down to the middle cage. Middle cage, you have Public Enemy of Johnny Grunge and Rocco Rock and the Nasty Boys of Brian Knobbs and Jerry Sags. So you go from 1-on-1 to 3 teams. You got to get a win here, pinfall submission to advance to the bottom. Again, I would have Sting and Luger win, advance to the bottom. In the bottom, which you have a ring in the bottom finally, you've got the Steiner Brothers of Scott and Rick. You have Harlem Heat of Booker T and Stevie Ray. And you have the Faces of Fear of Barbarian and Ming. And you have to win by pinfall or submission in the cage. So that, I think, that's your money is when you get down to that tier. Because these are all 4 guys I think could work a cage match, could work this giant conglomeration thing together. And like I said, you got to get the belts off of Sting and Luger. It doesn't really matter. I think I would probably give them the Harlem Heat and then have the Steiners kind of chase them. So, and because I didn't use the Road Warriors here, because I thought about using them, and then the more I thought about I didn't really like them in this.
Right.
So that's why I came up with the idea of, hey, if they're not going to be in here, they got to have something. So them getting the individual title matches were sort of their compensation for not being part of this thing here.
Wow. It's funny to me that we both used the tag team titles for this concept.
Yes.
Because it makes the most sense. And like your description of your match reminds me more of my triple tier cage match in one of our previous rebooks, where I just had different levels of weapons and just chaos and ridiculousness on each tier. Yours is more simplified. It just has every wrestler in the company in
every tag team, almost every, except for the Warriors. I think every tag team company is involved here.
But yeah, no, I think that your idea sounds really fun, and it would have been cool to see the tag teams in something like this, because I think it would have made more sense, and it would have been better visually to see that happen. It still would have been chaos, still would have been a clusterfuck, no matter if it's Leonard's match or mine, but I think it would have been better, either one of these. So, all right. My main event, the culmination of my storyline. So, later on in WCW, after Hogan has turned heel and Sting has become the Crow character, we see them face off. But we didn't see yellow and red Hogan against blonde flat top Sting. So that is my idea here. You have this huge matchup. It's not for a title. And you have Hulk Hogan versus Sting, the number one guy in WCW against the guy who was number one in WWF for many years, finally going head to head. There doesn't need to be necessarily a storyline where they hate each other. It could just be, I'm challenging you, Hogan, because I want to know if I'm better than you. It could be something that simple. And meanwhile, in the background, you still have this alliance to end Hulkamania, that maybe some of those matches happened on Nitro, and that's still a background storyline. So my crazy idea is I have to admit, Leonard, I was struggling on how to incorporate the Doomsday Cage, and then struggling with how to involve enough people when rebooking this card. It took me a little bit to really think of a hook, and I finally found one here that I think would make sense. Yeah. So keep in mind, if I could be wrong here, but I think by and large, this is one of Hogan's last appearances before months down the road at Bash at the Beach, he would emerge and turn heel. So
close to it, I'd have to look, but yeah.
Now he might have made an appearance on TV or something. I'm sure he did. But in terms of matches at pay-per-views, I did look at that, and Hogan was not featured on any pay-per-view until Bash at the Beach. So my idea here is I was thinking along the lines of some of the stuff they did with The Undertaker in WWF. You have everyone come out here to end Hulkamania. Not just the Alliance. You have the Booty Man. You have Randy Savage. You have Elizabeth. You have everyone coming out to help Sting beat Hogan. Or you don't even have to end it in a clean 1-2-3 finish. It could just be all these guys are coming out to just, swarm Hogan and destroy him completely. And the reason I think that this would have been a better visual, I mean, imagine for a second going out on a pay-per-view with all of Hogan's friends and all of Hogan's enemies combining to end Hulkamania. To me, that would have been such a crazy way to end a pay-per-view back then. And it might seem a little far-fetched, but we have seen stuff like that before with other characters. So the idea here is everybody talks about how during this era, Hogan would start to get boos and how the crowd wasn't nearly as invested in him as they once were. So I'm playing off that. And you might ask yourself, well, what are you going to do if all these people are turning on a face Hogan? You could figure that out. I truly believe you can figure that out. You could have Sting come out the next day and say, he never belonged here. This is my company. I'm the person you're behind, something to that effect. But that's what I would have happen here. I would have everybody turning on Hogan to try and get rid of him, so that the next time you see him, we don't know what's going on. He's coming out at Bash of the Beach, and we're still not sure what's going on, but he comes out, and because everybody has turned on him, he's turning heel. So you have like a little bit of a backstory to it. And maybe it's sacrilege to mess with his turning heel moment because it's such a classic moment in wrestling. But I think if you gave it just a little bit of a seed planted here, the fact that, oh man, we haven't seen Hogan since he was destroyed by everyone. What's going to happen here?
That's well, on one hand, that would maybe make more sense because originally Hogan was aligned with Nash and Hall simply because they came from the WWF, and Hogan was like, well, who knows more about that company up north than me, brother?
Right.
So that was the only connection, even though he was never affiliated with Nash and Hall while in the WWE.
Right.
So I think that maybe is a little more logical. Though I don't know how logical it is. I can understand you Savage coming out from how you set it up. And maybe Booty Man comes out because he's upset because the Giant kicked his ass because he's from
right. See, I was trying to plant the seed.
So you're planting some seeds there with that. So you could have a lot of those people come out, be part of this. I want Hogan to be put into a casket and then wheeled out.
It's funny you mentioned. I thought about that, but I was like, it doesn't make any sense for me to use a casket. So what do I do? You could have them do a bunch of stuff and have Hogan taken away in an ambulance or whatever. But I was like, well, how do you involve a casket? That doesn't even make any sense. Like, it wasn't until AEW that you started seeing other people not being the Undertaker involved in casket matches. Like Darby Allin against Brody King recently had a casket match or coffin match, excuse me. But,
and then you could have Hulk Hogan versus Hulk Hogan.
Yeah.
So maybe it's Horace Hogan. I don't know.
Logically. But backing up, I think it would be cool to see the two face characters of these guys have a match together because that's something we would never see. And it was such a big moment when they finally did get together, but they're both dressed in black. And it would have been, I think it was a slightly missed opportunity that these two never got together. They just kind of had Sting, the flat top blonde Sting, kind of, retreat back to being, well, we're so glad Hogan's here and, we're going to support him, that kind of thing. It would have made more sense from a booking standpoint to have him at least want to challenge him once.
Yeah, and I think this could be a good match in its own way. I'm just thinking that behind the scenes, there would be a lot of that doesn't work for me, brother. Hogan going for your idea in any way, shape, or form. Let's see booking.
Here's why I thought of this. So the Doomsday Cage concept as it was on the original card, to me, it didn't make any sense as far as like you have to have Hogan and Savage go down 3 tiers and win. Like the concept is designed so it makes it obvious that they're going to win. Like you're not going to have just them get down to the bottom tier and then have whoever's at the bottom tier win. Like it to me, it's like it wasn't a well-designed set of rules for this type of cage match. And I was going to have it be more of a 4-on-4 situation with Hogan and Savage and Sting and the Booty Man in a Doomsday Cage. But I went away from that in favor of this idea because I think it would have been a cool visual to see during an era when Hulkamania was clearly not getting over as much as they wanted it to have it be like, have like a more clear-cut ending in this way. Because I think the way they did the Doomsday Cage match on the card, it just wasn't well thought out. It was just such an obvious, like, okay, the two underdogs are going to overcome everything and win, so.
Yeah, and I think you would find Sting getting the more of the face pop as it went along.
Right.
And I think it would be very interesting to see how the crowd would react to your schmaz of everybody coming out. Like, would they start cheering for Hogan now as the underdog? Or would they be like, yeah.
Like, yeah, think about like the Nexus coming out and destroying the set of Raw. Like, I'm like that one time. I'm thinking like something like that. It would just be this huge, massive chaos. And like eventually WCW would get to stuff like that. Eric Bischoff was an innovator in many ways. So I think he'd be for this idea. Now Hogan, he'd probably have to be sold on it for a few weeks. But
yeah, I think he would be promised this huge return. And at this point, I don't know if they knew they were getting Hall and Nash.
Right.
And what they're going to do with them. So I think Hogan has to be promised, this huge return, this triumph, this thing of your character. You're going to come back and you're going to beat everybody. Like we're going to do.
Like, okay, you're going to come back as a heel, and he still gets to beat everybody.
Yeah,
but he's a heel.
We're gonna do World War III, where you eliminate all 60 dudes.
I would have loved to have seen that.
Yes, that may be what you would have to promise Hogan to get him to do this. It's a crazy idea, but again, I think the idea here we both did with Uncensored was just throwing the craziest crap we could think of out there, because that's sort of what this type of pay-per-view goes for. And really, at this time, yeah, there were storylines going in WCW, but nothing that entertaining, nothing that interesting. So at the very least, even in a car crash kind of way, I think both our cards are a little more interesting than what we got.
I think looking back, if you would have said, oh man, hey, you remember that match where Sting faced Hogan and like everybody beat the shit out of Hogan? Like, to me, I don't know. That would make more sense to remember something like that than, oh, you remember that Doomsday Cage match? No.
With the frying pans?
The frying pans. So, is that it, Leonard? Is that all of our matches?
Yeah, I'm done. Yeah.
All right. Well.
Yeah, here's the thing. Next time we do a Fever Dreams, I want a frying pans to be a stipulation for some match.
We should have a frying pan match.
It could be frying pan on a pole. It can be just you come out with frying pans.
I got it better now. Frying pans in a shark cage, and you got to get to the frying pans in the.
You have to bust open the shark cage to get at the frying pans. Yes.
Sold. All right. Well, let us know what you think of Uncensored 96, the original card, and what you think of our rebooks. We always have fun doing them because, you get to do whatever you want. Let us know what matches you would have made with this roster of guys. And, we didn't go crazy with the roster this time, Leonard. We stuck more to what was there. I made a point to do that, by the way. I didn't even research other people that were not with WWF.
I didn't either. I looked at who WCW had. I looked at who was on main event, right. And I used everyone and there was a lot of people I didn't use. I didn't use Shark. I didn't use Big Bubba Rogers. Right. I didn't use Dick Slater. Of course, he was with Bunkhouse Buck at the time as a tag team. That's the only tag team I don't think
you didn't use.
I used. Well, totally weren't going to use them. But there were some guys that I didn't use. And you know what? If I'm correct, the Gambler was here. I could have used the Gambler.
Oh man, we should have. That should have been Ric Flair versus the Gambler.
Should be. I think it should have been the Gambler, and like same thing as Hogan in the Doomsday Cage, but it's the Gambler.
The Gambler,
all the way down,
going through 3 tiers.
Going through 3 tiers with frying pans.
The Alliance to End Gambling.
Yeah.
That's what we have. That's what we got to do.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let us know what you thought of our cards. Any comments are welcomed. If you hated our cards, those comments are welcomed as well.
Yeah, maybe some of that.
Please check out our Stupid Questions videos and our random match reviews. And we are also available on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Please click like on this video and subscribe to our content. We appreciate all the help. For Leonard, my name is Chad. We will see you next week, and Alexa will see you out.